everything else. So yeah, if you need a hand, shout out.
Okay, I will. Thanks very much indeed.
No problem.
Okay.
Many years ago as well, Terry, I actually did write a manual for a software package from the perspective of a user.
Okay.
So if you wanted somebody to try it out,
We have some hidden expertise in the group.
Wow.
More than that, they're volunteering, Chris.
Yeah.
No, that's lovely. Oh.
Well, that'd be great, guys, because I'm going to try and do it from the point of view of nil knowledge, and then I'll certainly involve both Michael and Morris in it, and maybe a couple of other people to see if they reckon it's any better than it was before. And if it isn't, we'll keep banging at it until it is.
feel free.
Okay.
Okay. Well, let's get started. I hope a few more will join as we go along. But as I say, if we're recording it, then they can catch up later on. Just from introduction point of view, everybody knows everybody except Morris, who is on my screen down in the bottom left-hand corner. Morris is the clever guy who's written all this in the first place. So if we have any problems with it, we talk to Morris. So he has kindly offered to be here to answer any stupid questions we may have.
Oh, well done.
So thank you very much for joining, Morris. And also Morris has set up a dummy company or club so that we can just play tonight and it won't affect anything. So don't worry if I choose you, Terry, to fly, then you won't get charged.
If I could just add one thing, guys, if I may.
So I'm going to share my screen. So the first thing is that, as we've just been talking about, there is a launch point guide in the blue binder that sits on the desk upstairs every day. I've highlighted a few things, but I won't go through it line by line. Suffice it to say, if FreeFlight doesn't work when you get there in the morning, it is almost certainly 99% certain not FreeFlight's problem. It is the mobile phone problem.
Right.
So there is something called tethering, and you have to make sure that the mobile phone is set up for tethering. It happened last week. Somebody said, oh, it's not working, and we're resorting to paper. I said, no, if we read the manual, it'll tell us how to, what to do, and to enable it, you go to network, settings, network, and internet hotspot, and make sure tethering is turned on. And immediately FreeFlight will work.
Okay. We noticed this morning it took a couple of minutes for the tether to connect, etc., but it did.
Yeah, but it's so everything we're going to cover is actually in very short, sharp, bullet point almost, bits and pieces. Mark wrote this, as you can see from the bottom there, back end of September last year. So it's been in the binder for at least 6 months, and I suspect very few people have even looked at it, which is not that clever, really. So, what we'll do is go to Morris's test system. I'm going to have to log in. When you turn the computer on at the launch point, it will log you in automatically. If it doesn't, again, the instructions in the manual tell you how to do it. And the password and everything else is in that launch point instructions. Okay. So if the computer was shut down properly the day before, then this will be what you see as you open FreeFlight for the first time in the morning. You only see this once. Once you've entered something in there, so you know it's a clear day, north, west, southwesterly wind, whatever, and then you just hit continue, and that basically has started the log sheet. So now we have a daily log sheet.
Chris, just to confirm a point, the weather is free format. You can put in what you like.
You can put in what you like, and most people have. Some people have ignored it completely and just hit continue, which is not that helpful. But
didn't see it this morning when we started up.
well, that's probably because the computer wasn't shut down properly the night before.
Yesterday's flights were still in there, so
Yes,
that's a clue.
that is absolutely confirming what I've just said.
Yeah.
It wasn't shut down properly the night before.
Mm-hmm.
Chris, can you guys hear me?
And the instructions.
I can hear whoever said that.
Yeah, that's me. It's Morris.
Morris.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just one thing. If you do find that you log in the morning, there's some flights already there, just immediately log out and go back in again. The other thing is, in terms of the weather, I always tell our people, if ever there's an incident at the club and the people want to look back at the records, I'm just making sure it's not a good idea for members to write things like wall-to-wall rat shit on the paper. Try and keep it factual, so that if there ever is an incident, you can accurately report to the AIIB or whoever wants to know what the actual weather was on the day. Just a practical point, but sorry, I'm going to shut up now and just listen into you guys.
You know, what Morris has said is absolutely true. And, you know, this is a legal requirement to keep accurate records of the flights, both for the individual purposes, so for your own logbooks, but also for Ian Pattingale and others who are inspectors, you know, when they have to, you know, so for instance, FHO next year is going to have to come offline for a considerable period of time because it will be due its 7,000 hour checks. And that only gets added to when it's logged properly on the computer. So if we don't log it properly on the computer, then you know, we're going to be giving the inspectors false information. And also, there have been instances in the last couple of weeks of some flights being completely missed. Now, if there's no log and that flight gets into trouble and has an accident, we are going to be in a lot of trouble. So this really is important to understand. So you've got a number of tabs across the top and a number of, for want of a better expression, tabs down the side. The first tab is the launching tab, which shows you any flights that are sitting on the grid waiting to launch. The active flights will show you what is in the air. And the landed flights, well, they're the ones that have landed. Crew you can use, but you know, I think we already know that because you get a daily sheet, a weekly email anyway. So, and then the other important one on the top is the intros today. So we had today a 4-flighter and two 2-flighters.
Mm-hmm.
This is who on earth is that? Ian Firth. So this is important as well. These are the pre-booked ones. You will get a list of whatever across when you go to the intros today. So what we're going to do is look at each of the methods of starting a flight. So the normal one for members flying is to use standard. When you hit standard, you get this window. So we will use our illustrious CFI as the P1. You can type any part of his name and it'll come up with as many different options as possible. So if I were to put in Strand for the P2, I've got Isaac and I've got Andrew as well. So we'll choose Isaac. You can see their account numbers as well. Aircraft, you can either scroll down or type in part of the registration and then double click it. If you don't put an aircraft in there, Maurice has got a fairly amusing pop-up that says, beam me up, Scotty, because you haven't given it an aircraft. Ours will always be winch, so there's nothing to change there. And when you create a flight, it ends up on the launching tab. One of the things I think has gone wrong over the last couple of weeks is at the launch point, you can think that 2 or 3 people are going to go in succession and then somebody else pushes in. And I am guessing here, but I think some people have deleted a flight from here because they're not going first, but it doesn't matter. So we can set up a second flight. We can put Paul in that one with
Chris, that prompts a question from me. I can see down the list, there's a test flight box. So if we are test flying an aircraft, I'm assuming we can simply tick that box. And then what happens to it? It's not charged or what?
I would have to have a look underneath to see whether it's charged or not, but yes, you can do test flights.
Okay, it's just the first flight after a full refit or whatever.
Should be a test flight, yeah, and should be flown by an instructor as well.
Well, yeah, what happens is we tend to throw a sacrificial volunteer in the back and do it as a standard flight.
Yeah.
But it's nice to know we have the option.
Just to clarify that for you guys, the test flight will not be charged.
Okay, test flight.
Automatically.
Okay.
It would just ignore any flight charges and charge the fee at 0. Sorry, I just dropped my headphones off my head then.
That's okay. So all my solo flying from now on is test flights.
Yeah, good try, Paul.
I'm saying nothing.
So we've got 2 flights set up, but we've set them up wrong because it's not Phil flying, it's Michael, let's say. So you've got 4 buttons over here. You've got the launch button. You've got the reverse P1 and P2. So if you put them in the wrong field, you can just click that and it'll swap them around. Or you've got an edit flight details. So it wasn't Phil Moore, it was Michael Boland, and you have to go down to the bottom to hit the save button. But now we've got Michael flying with Paul and Isaac flying with Richard. When you're ready to launch, just press the button. Disappears from there, goes to the active sheet, and you can see that it's got an uptime. If you've been a bit late pressing the button and they've got to the top of the launch and you want to edit the time, then you can go in here and say, sorry, I was a minute late pressing the button. So you can change it.
What button is that again, Chris?
What button? The third one there. If you hover over them, they tell you what they're doing.
Got
So
it.
edit flight details. That's the reverse P1 and P2. If you're doing a standard flight, the P1 will not be charged. The P2 will be charged. So Michael will be charged for this flight. Isaac will be charged for the other flight.
The caveat to that is if it's a solo flight, there's only a P1, they will be charged.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sorry. Yes. Yeah. So two-seater, the P2 gets, if the P2 field is filled in, the P2 gets charged. Other than that, if Paul takes the grub up on his own, then he gets charged for it.
If I want to do a dual flight, but I want to take the hit for paying for the flight, can we swap the names over?
Well, no,
What are the legal implications about P1, P2?
you are P1 because you are the senior person. You are the instructor.
That's what I would expect.
However, there is a mutual or passenger flight where you can share the costs or allocate the costs.
Right. Okay. So it comes under a different category.
Yeah.
Just to clarify that, if it's a mutual flight, the P1 will be charged instead of the P2, unless you hit the split box. If you hit the split box, the cost will be split between the two pilots. The caveat on that is that it will only split. What it will do is it will ignore any special offers or special deals that people have got, and it will charge the entire flight at normal club rates, and it will equally then apportion the cost of that flight between the P1 and the P2.
Okay.
Can I ask a question on charging as well, please? Because I'm the oddity, I've got two-seat glider, and where I fly, say if I'm taking someone up for a jolly who happens to be an instructor, technically I'm the P1 because I'm the captain of the aircraft, I'm current, but then also I could be flying the CFI who's not current, but would be P1. It causes caused a couple of problems the other day.
You are causing more problems over the last 2 years than you know.
Sorry.
So Morris, Andrew, which is coming up as Ian by the look of it, has got a two-seat captain, and he's flying a lot of members. So yeah, we'll deal with that, Andrew.
Thanks. I don't know why I'm coming up as Ian. I don't know who Ian is.
No, nor do I.
You've been hacked.
I have.
So
A lot of it about these days.
okay, so we've launched the first flight. We can launch the second flight, no problem at all. Oh, sorry, I've just landed it. Sorry. Okay, so I made a mistake. You can unland him. Now gone back to the active sheet. So there are lots of things you can do and get it wrong and quickly put it right. So if we launch Richard as well, we've now got 2 or more flights on the active, and we will land Paul anyway. So Paul has now landed. He's on the landed page. Richard is in the air. Richard's in KFG, right? Okay, so we can either now go and let's say David Kirby Smith is there. So he's P1, solo flyer. He's going to fly at the K8. We can create that flight, and yeah, we can launch it. So now we've got 2 in the air again. David's solo pilot, Richard with a student, and Paul has landed with his student. Now we've got a trial lesson. So we go to the intros today. and whoever's first up, let's say it's the first one, we press fly. What that does is it brings up the same window, but pre-populated with the guy's name. So all we now need to do is get Paul to flying. And Paul's in FHO. And we can create, we want it winch, and we can create that flight. And it goes onto the launching tab in exactly the same way. So instead of going to the standard, you go to the intros today and fly them that way.
If
Yeah,
if you make a mistake and you put in a pilot who's already in the air, so clearly can't be sitting there right as well, will it tell you not to be silly, or will it let you do it and have to change it later?
I think it lets you do it actually.
Yeah, if I can just interject, I kind of took a pragmatic approach to this because a lot of instructors, particularly in the summer when it gets busy, then, and again, particularly on a winch launch site like ours at Camp Hill, they know they're going to do a 3-flight series with a trainee. So they want to just line them up on the grid ready to fly. It just saves a lot of time, saves a lot of
Sense, doesn't it? Yeah.
But yeah, the downside is that you can have an aircraft in the air and waiting to launch, and you can have a pilot that's in the air and waiting to launch. You just gotta watch out for it, really. But
Yeah.
I'll guarantee that over the coming years, you'll be thankful that you can do that.
I'm just guessing the mistake I'm going to make because it looks right prime for me, so I was trying to anticipate that one. Thank you.
So we'll come back to some of those in a second. I just want to allow them a little bit of time to have elapsed. You can see here the P2's name, and you can see his membership number. So all of the older ones are letters, all the new ones are numbers. And if you look at the intros today, they're all going to be 999. We'll get to returning temporary members in a minute, and they will be 998. So Richard's been up far too long, so we'll land him. And we'll let David stay in the air for a bit. Let's launch Paul again. So he's now in the air with his trial flight. So we've got 2 flights in the air. If we go down the left-hand side, we've already dealt with standard. We've talked about mutual. Let's have a look at that. I'm going to double with aircraft here. We probably will end up launching the same aircraft several times. So we can put Sam in there as P1, and we can put John in there as P2 because he's only a BI apparently. And they can, if you tick that, they can split the costs. Again, that will go to the launching tab, ready to launch. What we'll do is we'll launch that quickly, and we'll just wait a minute or so, and then we will land him. What that's going to do is throw a pop-up at us to say this flight was less than 3 minutes, so it could very well be a launch failure. So let's land him. So this looks like it might have been a launch failure. Please indicate whether it was, and if so, whether it was a real one or an exercise. So you've got 3 drop downs. No, it wasn't a launch failure. It was just an absolutely dreadful flight up and down. Yes, it was a real one. So if it's a real one, nobody gets charged. And if it's an exercise, then they do get charged, but they get charged a reduced rate for the flight. So we can say it was a real one, and now nobody will be charged. And if you go to the landed, there it is, 0 fee. Okay.
Chris, in most cases, the person on FreeFlight won't know the difference at the point of launch failure. So presumably one can correct that afterwards in a similar way to what you've demonstrated in other parts?
I presume so, yes. I haven't tried that, but I'm assuming so, Norris.
I mean,
Yes, you can. You just go into the edit and change the launch failure from whatever it was to whatever it said it was. Just try it if you want.
In my experience, most of the real launch failures, the instructor gets a message to the control point because they also usually warn the winch driver as well.
Yeah.
So you actually do know a lot of the time.
Fair point, yeah.
You can see the strop drop as well, mostly.
Chris, can I just say, so if an individual flying solo or whatever pole bends up the launch and breaks a weak link, which costs us money, they get a free launch.
Point.
That's a very weird way of looking at it, Andrew.
Yeah, but obviously only if
Probably
it's
get stern words from the instructor at the same time.
Yes.
So, okay, so I've landed all the flights apart from David, who's thermaling over Croydon.
Unusual.
So if I go back to the intros today, this guy has got a 2-flighter, 2 air experience flights, it says there. He's had 1 flight, we can see that there. So when we want to give him his 2nd flight, again, we can just hit the fly, give him back to Paul. I've forgotten what aircraft. Winch, create. Now the guy is ready for his 2nd flight. He's on the launching page, so we can launch him. Okay, I'll leave that for a minute. We've looked at standard, we've looked at mutual passenger. The other one is interesting one is guest. So, sorry, press that rather quickly. If you press guest, it comes up with a window. On the following screen, enter the name of the member who is to be charged for this flight. Okay, so I'm going to say that my daughter has come up for a flight. I didn't know she was coming, so she hasn't been booked in anywhere. I am not an instructor, so I can't take her up, but I will pay for the flight. So if you type in the surname of the member, it will come up with both me and my wife. So it's me who's going to pay for it. I'm going to continue that. I'm going to get Richard to fly her because he's the best, or so he keeps telling us. And it's going to be an FHO. Now the P2 field is just FreeFlight, is just free typing. So I can type in anything I like. Okay, actually that's not her married name. There you go. So that's her married name. And we can create that flight. So now if we look at the launch, we've got Richard, we've got Jenny being flown, but I'm paying for the flight. And it does say guest there as well. So most of Andrew's flights over the last 2 weeks should have been entered as guest flights. So he was flying his wife, he was flying his 3 children.
Now you know why he bought a 2-seater glider.
So you couldn't enter.
We all.
You couldn't enter them as standard because they're not members. So his wife and children were not at that stage members, although Isaac has now joined. And so if you enter it as guest, you can just free type into the field, and you can allocate who is going to be charged for it. And in that case, it would have been Andrew, obviously. So this guest one is going to become more and more important the more times Andrew gets his aeroplane out. And we need to make sure we get it right. I'm going to go back to the active tag, and I'm going to land the trial lesson. We can land David as well. So if I go back here and now look at the log for the day, our first flight was Michael, and he's going to be charged £10.54 for his 6-minute flight. Richard and Isaac had a 4-minute flight, £6.69.
And keep it cheap.
Sam and Jonathan, that was the cable, that was the launch failure, so there's no charge there at all. David Kirby-Smith had £11.80, it's fine. But there's an interesting one here. For the trial lessons, the whole charge gets charged against the first flight. So you will see 75 or 80 or 140 or whatever the price was at the time we sold the voucher for the first flight, and then any subsequent flights will be at 0. That is important because if we're not careful, we will end up with some oddities, and we certainly have done. Andrew had a launch failure last week with the first flight of a trial lesson, and therefore the second flight didn't get charged. So we did speak to Morris, and I think Morris is having a look at that in terms of it was a built-in feature that needs fixing, or otherwise known as a bug. But we've got the same again yesterday. There's a flight that is just has not been charged, and I don't know why. Mark thinks he does, but we'll have to have a look at that.
Is that down to the duration of the first flight?
If it's a launch failure, that's what caused this one, but that is not the case for today, or yesterday rather, sorry.
Right.
Just to clarify, the bug that this has brought to light is that if a flight completes, even though it might be a launch failure, it increases the flight count on the voucher sale. So the system knows that it's had one flight, but it hasn't charged the flight. And the best way to overcome that, until I can get this bug sorted out, is if you get a launch failure on a trial lesson, say no when the pop-up box comes up and say it's not a winch failure, not a launch failure. That way the flight should get charged.
So any trial lesson flights are valid flights, even if they're short. You deny it was a launch failure.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a part of the experience, wasn't it?
Absolutely.
Yes.
But it also,
Well, you have to charge for cleaning the seats is a different matter.
well, you might have to clean the canopy the way some of our people react.
Well, that's true. Yeah.
If it was a single flight that had a launch failure, then obviously what Morris has said, but you've then got to give them another flight. And when you go to the intros today, if it was a single flight, there's not going to be any left because it'll say one sort of thing. But you can still refly them and give them a third flight in this case. There is also a down here under trial lessons, free extra flight. And you can press it that way and come at it again that way.
It brings exactly the same window up as the tab does. It shows that some of our guys at Camp Hill couldn't understand to go back to the tab and reselect the flight. So I just put an extra menu item on to make it clear to them. But I'm sure your guys are a lot better than that.
You haven't come and flown with, have you?
Well, no, I was planning to do a world tour this summer, but half the summer's gone now and I've not even got out of the house yet. I'll come and see you next year, guys. Don't worry.
Good, that'd be good. Well, I think
Sorry, can I just ask? So if it's a trial lesson single flight and they have a launch failure, would you still say that there wasn't a launch failure and then give them a free extra flight?
Yeah, saying it wasn't a launch failure is a way of overcoming the bug where it would be not charged. We have to make sure that that first flight gets charged. So otherwise, the flight count on the voucher will go up, and the system will say this is not the first flight, even though it was a launch failure. So I will fix it. It's on my list of things to do, but just for now, just mark it as not a launch failure. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
So we've got my daughter to fly, so there we go, we can do that one. So we've covered standard, we've covered guest, we've covered mutual passenger, returning temporary member. So if we press that, we get another window. If the person you are looking for is not in the following list, they're not within their allotted 90-day temporary membership. Now, 90 days is what Morris has built into the system. And actually our temporary membership is 30 days. So it is important when you're launching a temporary member, just to check that they are still within their allotted time. But the date that they had their flight is there in the first place. So we know that Lawrence was here last Thursday and he had he booked one flight. It says flights allowed 1, flights taken 2, because Richard gave him a second flight. I know that because I was there.
They were very short.
So we gave him better ones today.
Good, good.
So I gather, yeah.
So we can continue with that. And again, it automatically populates Lawrence, and we can say, well, Richard's going to fly him again. And aircraft, FHO, winch, create. So when we now look at the P2 membership number, it says 998. There was one problem today, which we hadn't anticipated. So in the system, there are a number of places where we can enter certain things to better control the club. And one of them is the pilot overdrawn? If the pilot hasn't got money on his flying account, then it should tell us that he's not got money in his flying account. But if he gets to £100, then you can't launch him. There is no way, it will not launch him, because we've set that limit as £100. That gave us a problem today with the returning temporary members, because we've got a spate of them, and it doesn't say that Lawrence King has spent £100. It says temporary members have spent £100. So I have temporarily increased that limit to £250 to get around the problem while we work out what to do.
Can I
no-
just
no-
come in there, Chris?
Yeah.
That sounds like they're when they pay for the flights. Is anybody actually applying the charges tonight? To the
Yeah,
payments to 998?
there are a few extenuating circumstances. Dorcas has been away for 10 days, and we were a little bit behind, and one or two people hadn't paid. But yeah, it's all sorted now.
Okay, there is another option for that. I don't want to muddy the water, but I only found this out the other day. One of the other clubs on the system have determined that if somebody does come back within their period, then they're kind of ripe for potential membership.
Yep.
That point, they actually set an account up for them so that the flights themselves will be recorded against their personal account. If they do join the club, then you've got a record of their flight. Now, it's entirely up to you whether you want to do that or not, but the way they get around it, if they just turn up unannounced, you can put them in as I'm trying to click your screen here. You can put them in as a visiting pilot and then change the membership type later in the back office part of the system.
Okay.
Don't change anything for now, but if you want to look at that more closely, then talk to me after the meeting, maybe in a day or two, and I'll
Okay, Maurice,
walk
that's
you through
great.
the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
So that explains what happened today, Paul. With it looked like Alan had basically run out of credit.
Yeah.
But it was all of them.
It was all of
It was
them.
Alan and Lawrence and yeah.
They ganged up on us.
Yeah.
Mhm.
But can I just ask a question at this stage? Maurice, you mentioned visiting pilots. I don't see that in the list of flight types. Do we have an allocation for visiting pilots?
List of what? Sorry.
Visiting pilots.
Visiting and vintage pilots. We're not saying you're old, Paul, but you know.
Oh, I hadn't got that far down the list.
So
you
yeah.
tend to find that visiting pilots have been put on the membership database, but with a special type of visiting pilot. So they will have a number. They will have a number. The check for visiting pilot account is just for you to check to see whether they are in the database or not. If they've been before, they'll be there because we don't never delete anything from FreeFlight. So, but if they're a new visiting pilot, then you'll have to enter some details about them, just in case they try to walk off without paying. You know?
Okay, so it's basically ask the questions, fill in a form online, and then they become recognised visiting pilots.
Yeah, with a number,
Okay,
so you
got
can
it.
enter them as a standard flight then.
So for instance, Adrian Light is on there as a visiting pilot. Tom Arscott would be on there as a visiting pilot.
Right.
So yeah. So there is also new intro walk-ons. We're not doing those at the moment. But what you can do is if you've got somebody who wants to fly, who's just turned up and says, any chance of me having a flight today? They haven't got a voucher. So if you hit new intro, you basically get the window that we get when we're setting up voucher flights. So it gives you a voucher number. And if you click the product, you've got TL1 trial lesson 1 flighter, TL2 trial lesson 2 flighter, and TL4 trial lesson 4 flighter. You can press TL1. Name on the voucher is Fred Logs, and the fee it knows about because you put the product code in. It knows that if you put 2 in it, it'll come up as £80, and if you put a 4 flighter in, it'll come up as 140.
Chris, we used to do a lot of ad hocs. Steve was famous for saying, give me 20 quid, we'll fly you for a single flight.
Oh,
Can we?
No.
No.
Maurice has just had a heart attack.
But we used to do a lot of that. There's the potential for it to happen again. If we're saying from now on it's all above board and kosher, fine, I'll go with that.
Well, it really ought to be. You know, if you really want to do something like that, then really all you can do is fly them as a guest of yourself and then get them to pay you the money.
Yeah,
Which leads to all sorts of problems, but yes, I take your point.
Correct. It's chaotic, but it would work.
To be perfectly frank, guys, your prices are dirt cheap. If you can't pay that price for a flight, then send them.
Why we don't make any money, Morris?
Send them to the local tiddlywink factory. I mean, we charge 75 quid for a single trial lesson.
Yeah, but to get the extra experience with us.
The other window down here is obviously how they're going to pay for it. You know, if it's a walk-on, we really ought to get cash on the day in terms of either cash or a credit card, rather than any of the other options.
It brings PayPal into a whole different meaning, doesn't it?
Yeah. You know, and for records, we really ought to have an email address of the person you're flying, although it's not essential. The red ones are absolutely mandatory. You've got to fill them in somehow. So you can create that flight, you can create that intro, and then you can fly them. So I won't do that one. So.
Chris,
yeah.
I think you just said when you've got a walk on or somebody doing somebody a favour for 20 quid, we wouldn't necessarily want to know their address. Did I get that right?
Yeah, we're saying we wouldn't do the 20 quid. We're saying if they're a walk on, they pay the full price.
Yeah, okay. But are we in danger of being, sorry, I may have misheard you. Are we in danger of not having enough information on the punter if there is an accident?
Still fill in the temporary membership form, wouldn't they?
Yes, they would still have to fill in the temporary membership form.
Okay, right.
If I can just add my marketing to Peneth, the reason the email address is there to capture, and the box underneath, which you didn't actually mention, Chris, which is the market research question, was that you can do marketing follow-up in FreeFlight. So anybody who's had a trial lesson this month, at the end of the month, you can email them if you've got their email address. You can say, hope you enjoyed the experience. You can point them at a survey to see whether they enjoyed the experience. You can say, by the way, do you know we've got a special offer on membership this month? So, because I was the marketing officer at Camp Hill for 15 years, so a lot of what's in here is what I, as a marketing person, wanted to see in there. And I don't make any apologies for that, because I think the gliding movement is terrible at marketing itself. So yeah, I would say to everybody, capture their email address, because you might want to use it in the future, and also ask them the market research questions. How did you hear about us? Because it made a difference to me as to where I spent my limited budget in order to attract more trial lessons. You know, it was through the market research question that we eventually said, right, okay, the place to be is Facebook, nowhere else. So we ditched everything else and we started doing Facebook marketing. In the past, we bought space in all kinds of bloody media that never brought us any business. You know, so it's well worth capturing. I'll shut up now because I'm on my hobby horse, so you can probably imagine.
I have to leave. Thanks very much for organising this.
Okay, Michael.
I will look at the recording, and don't forget my offer at the beginning is there if you want to pass anything past me.
That's very kind. Thank you very much.
I've got to go. Thanks very much, folks. See you soon. Bye-bye.
Hey, Michael.
I think really that's about it, unless anybody's got any questions or Morris has got anything that I've missed.
So the ones picked out in red, they're just non-members, I guess, are they?
Yes, they are the trial flights, and that one was a guest.
Mm-hmm.
They will also come up in red if the person who's flying, who's P1, has not registered their medical with us.
I asked you this question last week, didn't I? And I remember the answer now. Yeah.
So Stephen Swan and Ian Pattingale have not given us their medicals. They've got them, just haven't given them to us. So
depending on what's in your system, you can get. There's 3 ways that people can be redlined. They don't prohibit flying. They're a warning that somebody maybe needs to be alerted. One is the person is no longer current. The second one is the person might require an annual check flight because it's coming close to his time. No, sorry, it won't. It will redline them if they are beyond their annual check flight date. And it will also, as you rightly said, Chris, redline them if their medical has expired. So those are the 3 ways that a red line can occur.
Maurice, there's no currency redlining in there.
There should be. I guess all you guys are current are. I don't know. Unless you've
Oh,
not
yeah,
got
yeah,
any
yeah.
currency- Unless you've not got any currency details.
No, that's down to us to monitor internally, really. But
I think it should be there.
by what criteria?
By the criteria. Okay, so
It tends to be a variable feast.
Right. It's a mixture of whether they're early solo, bronze cross country, silver, instructor, and they're all differing times. So I think I'm right in saying, and don't quote me on this, the solo pilots are 30 days and the instructors are 90. That's how the system has been set up. But as I say, I would have to double check on that, but I think that's how we set it up. So if Dave Addison came back to fly, he should show up in red because he hasn't flown for ages.
Okay. As long as we understand what the red means.
Yeah. Well, it means different things. That's the problem. So, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's a warning flag. End of.
You can always find out what the red means by clicking the little arrow to the left of any of the red lines.
Oh.
It will
Ah,
expand the line.
yeah, okay.
Okay.
Now they're just voucher flights, but normally if the flight is ready to launch, that's when you need to look. It's no good looking after they've taken off because it's not a lot you can do about it then. But if it's on the launching tab and it's red, click the little arrow and it will tell you why it's red. And then it's up to you guys to make a decision about what you do.
Perfect. Thanks, Maurice.
Yeah.
That's useful.
I've got a question about payment because we're flying quite a few returning temporary members at the moment. Do we have the facility to take credit card and debit card payments at the launch point?
Not at the launch point, no. Because there's not.
Back in the office or nowhere.
Yeah, there's no internet connection. Is the reason? It's not wireless. It's plugged into the wall.
Oh, I thought the laptop connected via the mobile phone.
The laptop does, but the credit card machine doesn't.
Okay.
So the credit card machine is in the office.
In the office.
To the left of the computer and is relatively straightforward to use. Just putting.
So if somebody comes up short on money, we march them back to the office.
Yes, definitely.
Squeeze them till they've paid, and then we resume our normal business.
Yeah, so we just need to keep on top of that, don't we, of making sure we get their money.
Yeah.
For people.
I do monitor that.
Okay.
And you can always give them the bank details or ask them to email in and we'll give them the bank details. Like I gave those, the details to both Lawrence and Bob today. So hopefully they'll do bank transfers. But obviously what they do need to know is how much their flights were for that day.
Yeah, so should we maybe have a form available at the launch point so we can just... There's always a rush at the end of the day, isn't it? Especially when people take 4 hours to de-rig their capstans.
Yes.
Who on earth would they do that?
If we just had a piece of paper with you did X amount of return flights today, it's cost you £24.50. These are the bank details, and we just give it to them. I mean, I don't mind knocking something up.
I shouldn't say I'm quite happy to do that. That sounds like quite a good idea, actually.
Just trying to make it, just reduce the admin when we're back at the look at the other end, and everyone just wants to go home, don't they?
always get one of these iZettle machines, but they charge commission, don't they?
They do, yeah.
Yeah, that's the problem. Mm.
They do, and it's quite expensive.
You know, without being silly, we're not trying to cut costs, but we're trying to keep the costs.
Yeah.
And that's the other thing. You know, as I said at the start, this is a legal document, and if we don't log the flights, we don't get paid for the flights.
Exactly.
So there are so many issues with not logging, with not doing this properly. Legally, we're in, breach of the Civil Aviation Authority's edicts. Secondly, we're not getting any money. It's silly.
If a glider goes missing, we don't even know it's taken off, do we? If we haven't logged it, right?
Yeah.
So we haven't really got a clue who's in it.
Mm.
And if it were to have an accident, we would be in a lot of trouble.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question, please?
Of course.
So the tabs on the left, what's rapid entry and FLARM used for?
FLARM is not used at all. Rapid entry.
Rapid entry is disappearing. It was something I did for the Canadians because they only had a very weak 3G signal, but it's never used over here, and it's going. In fact, I've got a new version ready to come out, and you'll find it disappeared. FLARM, unfortunately, FLARM is no longer free. They've started charging for it, so it might not be useful, but in the past it was very handy for just a situation where you might think you've actually missed a flight. You could have looked on the FLARM site. There's a back office facility to put your FLARM ID in so that you don't hit this screen.
Okay.
And it would just bring the list of flights up on that particular day, but that was before they started charging. It's quite cheap if you do if you're doing less than about 1,000 flights a year, but progressively above that, it can get quite expensive. I think it's about 180 euros for the full package.
FLARM's a flight tracking system.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mm.
But gliders only.
Mm.
Well, basically gliders only.
Yeah, it is, but it will track them wherever they are. But also, the main thing is on that K-Trax part of it. It's a bit like an aircraft logbook, so it will show you the up and down times. It doesn't tell you who the pilots are because it's no way of knowing, but it will tell you what the up and down times are and the identity of the aircraft. So if you think you've missed one, or you the dreaded scenario is you suddenly look around and think, shit, that aircraft's landed. When did it come down? I haven't got a clue. I missed it. So you can just go onto the FLARM tab, and it will tell you.
And do you have to have hardware in the glider to use that, or is it all done on radar?
Well, the aircraft needs to have FLARM. It needs to be FLARM equipped.
Okay.
Quite a number of the private aircraft have got FLARM, but they're being replaced in recent times by Sky Echo.
Well, or as well as.
It's much cheaper, Sky Echo.
None of the club aircraft have got it.
Well, we got a Sports Council grant for ours, so all of our
So,
aircraft.
Isaac, the short answer is that the technology is changing year by year. You buy one system, and the next year it's redundant, so you buy another system, and we've all got peed off with it until the aviation industry standardizes on something that's acceptable to us.
Transponders.
It's
We had a presentation of the distress and diversion cell by a guy from Swanwick, and he was saying that they don't follow FLARM or anything else, and they want everybody to use transponders in anything that flies, and that's what they're pushing through the government. So
Yeah, but they're really expensive, transponders.
Yeah, well, I've got one down south, and you're talking about round numbers, £1,000 an aircraft.
mm,
And there's no guarantee that transponder technology is going to go more than 5 years before they change their mind onto something else.
yeah. Mm.
It's a rat's nest.
Anyway,
Got this big new system at Swanwick, and all it will follow is transponders.
Yeah.
That's why.
So any other questions on FreeFlight? Rather
So
than
I think, Chris, I think I'll try and highlight this when I have a bash at this, but I think, the people who are using FreeFlight shouldn't be coerced into getting themselves in a state, if you know what I mean by that. They should play their part in slowing down the launching process if they don't know sufficient information about what's actually happening. I mean, this is fairly common, and if the guy upstairs has to go out and walk across the grass to find out a bit more, well, so be it.
Absolutely correct.
I think there's a danger that they feel that they're in the vanguard of all this, when actually they should be much closer to the front of things.
If you don't know, if you are doing the launch point and you do not know who's in that glider, you should not launch it.
Yeah.
This goes back to first principles before FreeFlight, no disrespect, was ever invented. We used to send runners out on the field saying, who the bloody hell's in that aircraft? And the same principles apply.
Yeah.
I still do it.
Run, Phil.
Well, not run, but shout.
To be honest, we have a vintage valley every year at our place, and we tell them straight, look, that duty clerk is probably the least experienced member of the club. He doesn't know you from Adam. If you want to fly, go in the bus and tell him who you are.
Yeah.
Otherwise, you don't fly. So we got a few groans the first year, but when we left them on the grid and launched the next line along, they quickly got the message.
Well, I think it's been useful, Maurice. Thank you for that.
I think it's a pretty good system. I mean, I've only been using it less than a year. The only time I scratch my head is with the kind of slightly special flights, like the mutual passenger flights and the guest flights, those type of things. So from, a write-up point of view, it would be nice to have a cheat sheet for each of those types of things, just to remind everybody where to find it. But standard flights, I think it's quite intuitive.
Yes.
Thank you. Chris,
I'd say the system, if it's used properly, is amazing. It really is. There's so much information being thrown around between aircraft and pilots and costs and everything else. It's an incredible system, really. And don't tell Maurice this, but without this, during COVID, we would have been in an awful lot of trouble.
One of the things I found at our club was, and I can't remember who did it, but or how you would go about doing it in your club, but we found that it was important to tell people, the ordinary members, the people who jump on the bus and do the flight logging, to try and give them a feel for what happens behind the scenes and why their job is important. We often tend to treat the duty clerk as the least important member of the club.
Yeah.
But actually, from getting that one flight correctly entered at FreeFlight, it updates the aircraft logs, it updates the pilot's logs, it makes sure that you get the fees accurately paid. It means that the CFI has got complete records of all the trainees and the flying that they've done. It means that you can at any time pull up any number of reports behind the scenes to analyze the flying of the club, which days are best. I mean, I know you guys are only kind of open 5 days a week, but we needed to do an exercise to find out which aircraft we didn't use so much in the winter, so we could maybe put them on ground cover and save a bit of money.
Yeah.
And all of that is available behind the scenes if the guys at the sharp end get the flight logging right.
Yeah.
You get that message across to everybody, and you're 90% of the way there.
I don't want to give you a cardiac arrest, Maurice, but later in the year, when the rules all change and the club is responsible for maintaining training records of student pilots, is there a plot afoot to build that in, or?
It's in hand. Chris, can I lift the skirts on our conversation the other day?
Of course.
Right, okay. There's 3 things coming up, 2 of which are there now, and 1 which will be ready by September. One of them, I was earwigging at the start how you use a mobile phone tethered. Okay, there is, and it should be available to you from Monday of next week. I don't expect you to use it straight away, but you can start trialing it. There is a complete mobile phone version of flight logging. So you will be able to go around the grid and say, what's your name? What's your membership number? and a person with a mobile phone, without being tethered, can go around just as you could in the old days with the paper sheets and the clipboard, and set up the flights. That hopefully will remove some of the burden from the actual timekeeper, whose job will then his focus will then change to being responsible for launching a landing. Now, it's not going to replace the laptop version or the tablet version. It's meant as an additional resource. It's in final testing now. The other thing that's available now is that getting ready for DTO status, we've expanded the skills section, and we've expanded the overnight reminder system, so that you can start setting up all the various skills at the instructor level. So whoever's got skill for cloud flying, or whoever's a cross-country flying, and this, that, and the other, and we can set up within the system if they need any revalidation checks when those checks are due, so that the overnight processes that send out all the reminders, for instance, if you've ever been in negative, if your accounts have ever been negative, you'll know that every Saturday morning you get an email message saying you owe the club some money. In the same way, the system will send out reminders if your annual check flight is coming due, and in the future it will send out reminders to all the instructors to make sure that they don't miss any deadlines as far as revalidation checks are concerned. So that's available now. The one that's coming in September, which I'm working like fury on, along with my own CFI to make sure I get it right, will be to put all the flight training records for each two-seater pilot online. What came out of a report from an incident at Eden Soaring was that there was a discrepancy in the flight training records. So what I'm hoping to end up with is a system whereby if you get a pilot come to you from another club, you'll be able to put in a special code, providing you've got the right access level within FreeFlight, which is the office access level. You'll be able to put in a special code. It will then interrogate another FreeFlight system and suck across to you an individual pilot's flight training records. So, but that is going to require a sea change shift in the way the instructors work. One of the things that my CFI said to me was, well, we fill the paper record cards in now. Why should we have to do it again? And I said, well, John, I've seen some of the paper record cards after a day on the bus and being stuck out in the rain. If I can put it so that when an instructor lands, he can pull out his mobile phone and put the results of the flight in there, and it goes straight onto a flight training record, surely that has got to be a better solution. And the answer came back, yes, but some of our instructors are 75 plus. Our instructor base is horrendous in terms of its age. He said, you're going to have your devil's own job to get people to change the way that they've been working for years. So all I can do as a developer is make it available to you, and it will be there in September. It's entirely up to you then whether you use it or not.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, useful.
Fantastic. Well, if nobody's got any other silly questions or even sensible ones, we'll wrap this up. And thank you very much, Maurice, for joining us and for setting up the test stuff so that we could just do silly stuff. Really helpful and very, very much appreciated.
Yeah, here.
Thanks, Maurice.
Thank you very much.
I'll
Thanks,
leave you all
Chris.
to it, and you can talk about me when I've gone. Okay. Take care. Bye.
Cheers, Maurice. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Boris.
Bye.
Right. Well, I think that's it. Everybody happy?
Yeah, it was good.
Yeah.
Thank you for organising it.
Yeah.
You can go outside and dance in the rain now.
I was going to say, my
Yeah.
wife actually watered the garden this evening. I think it was.
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
Having looked at the weather forecast, it's quite possible we may fly tomorrow. I don't know. But it's going to pack up. It's going to stop raining, I think, at about 9 o'clock.
That's
Yeah.
it.
We'll turn up and see what's what.
See what's what, yeah.
We'll turn up with a Wellington boots, Richard.
The thunderstorm's about 8 miles south of the coast now, but it's tracking a little bit more east. It might even miss us altogether.
Usually
more-
does.
There we go.
more towards Kent than here.
Oh, good.
Usually misses us.
Can we
Sure.
follow up?
Kent variant.
It will miss Chris and I anyway. I'm not sure about everybody else.
Or hit Isaac and I. Definitely, it's going
Yeah.
for Kent. Yeah. Isaac, just did a training lesson with Isaac on Cumin and Nimbus clouds and why we stay away from them. Anyway, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, thanks, everybody.
Bye.
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 Yeah.
Right.
Cheerio. See you all.
Cheers, guys.
Bye.
Thanks.